Hello world! Hackers are now using drones. We have the very first documented use of them by cybercriminals. And police trick a ransomware gang out of their decryption keys. That's all coming up in today's roundup of cybersecurity tech news. The idea of hacker drones has previously been just that, an idea. We've seen the potential of them discussed at various hacking conferences. Some people have even made proof of concept devices, but we've never seen one actually being used in the wild by cybercriminals. That is, until now. It might not be on the same level as a watchdog's hacking drone, which can seemingly do anything, but it is still big news. A security researcher has given us a breakdown of events. The incident affected a financial company on the east coast of the US. They knew something was wrong when they spotted unusual activity on their internal Confluence page. Confluence is a popular project management tool used by businesses, a valuable target for cyber miscreants because it contains juicy topics like intellectual property which could be held to ransom. And so, in the context of a hack, unusual activity on a company's Confluence server isn't all that unusual. What was unusual though is that this activity was originating on their own network. This is strange because hackers typically prefer to work remotely. Actually physically showing up in person to hack a company, Mr. Robot style, is quite rare. But this wasn't quite the case here. The company launched an investigation and found an unknown Wi-Fi device had connected to their network and was trying to cover its tracks by spoofing the MAC address of an employee. With the help of some fancy Wi-Fi tracing equipment, they began a hunt for the offending device, which led them to the roof, where they found two drones. Firstly, a DJI Phantom, a pretty standard drone you've probably seen before. Strapped to this thing was a Wi-Fi Pineapple, a popular Wi-Fi hacking tool. The second drone was a DJI Matrix 600, which is a beast. Described as a heavy lifting platform, this thing is designed to carry 6 kilos of camera equipment, though in this case it was loaded with a Raspberry Pi, GPD Mini, 4G modem, and of course a bunch of batteries to power the whole setup, which all in all is estimated to have cost in the region of $15,000. The plan of attack here was to use the Wi-Fi Pineapple on the smaller drone to intercept an employee's credentials, and then with the gear on the larger drone, use those credentials to log into the company's network and access their Confluence sites, all whilst managing the attack from miles away with the help of the 4G modem. But this is where we have to employ some guesswork, because thanks to NDAs, the exact technical details behind the hack can't be revealed by those who investigated it. However, Wi-Fi attack methods are a fairly well-trodden topic. It's likely the miscreants initially used an evil twin attack, as in creating a Wi-Fi network with the same name as the company's legit one, and then they just waited for an employee to connect to it by mistake. The process of waiting could have been sped up by intentionally kicking devices off the legit network in what's called a deauth attack, hoping that in their frustration, an employee would connect to the imposter Wi-Fi network by mistake. At this point, the attackers might have used a captive portal, as in those web pages that sometimes spawn when you connect to a new Wi-Fi network. You typically get them when you connect to Wi-Fi hotspots at airports or coffee shops, prompting you to sign in or something. But these can be repurposed to impersonate a genuine login page, socially engineering an employee out of their credentials. At this point, the attackers would have everything they needed to access the business's services and do whatever it is they came for, probably to steal data and hold it to ransom. In this case, the attack was a limited success because whilst they did actually manage to access that Confluence site, it looks like they were rumbled before much harm could be done. One thing that stood out to me about this whole story is that whilst on the surface it seems like the setup the miscreants were using was super high-tech and fancy, when you think about it, it was actually rather primitive and crude. It seems like the threat actors got a bit carried away here and just duct taped all their favourite devices to whatever drone was capable of carrying all that weight, resulting in a very expensive, bulky and power-hungry setup. A more skilled threat actor would be more thoughtful about their hardware, like maybe running the Wi-Fi exploitation on a Wi-Fi development board or a Pi Zero, and instead of controlling it via a power-hungry 4G modem, which I imagine is very traceable back to whoever bought the data plan for it, they could have used a low-power LoRa module transceiver. These things have several kilometers of range. An added bonus of a setup like this is that it would be so low power that they wouldn't need quite so many batteries, which would of course reduce weight further so that it could all be stuck on a much smaller and cheaper drone that if found on a roof wouldn't raise quite so much suspicion as a drone costing thousands of dollars. I mean, I'm not trying to give anyone ideas here, I'm just trying to make the point that the setup the miscreants were using was actually really quite ridiculous. It's as if they loaded everything but the kitchen sink onto their drones. Like, I can't understand why they needed to strap a GPD mini laptop to the larger drone when they already had a Raspberry Pi on it. What point is there in a second computational device? Redundancy, maybe? In the future, I think we can expect to see this kind of drone attack evolve to be a bit more sophisticated. So one thing I wanted your guys' opinion on is what to call this kind of drone attack. Hacker drones doesn't really roll off the tongue very well, and I haven't read about any better ideas. Let me know your thoughts down below. Dutch police have tricked the Deadbolt ransomware gang out of 155 decryption keys. Now this story is amazing. If you needed some uplifting news, well, we have some here. So the Deadbolt ransomware gang have recently become well known for attacking QNAP devices, which is a brand of network attached storage device. Back in January, Deadbolt discovered a 0-day vulnerability in these things, and ever since then they've been exploiting it to encrypt and hold QNAP devices to a ransom of 0.03 Bitcoin, roughly $600. Once a victim pays up, Deadbolt has an interesting way of delivering the decryption key. In their ransom note, they proudly state that our decryption key delivery process is 100% transparent and honest. So after a victim pays the ransom, the decryption key will be delivered to the Bitcoin blockchain inside the op return field. This is a special field in a Bitcoin transaction which can be used to store up to 40 bytes of arbitrary data on the blockchain. Deadbolt are using this field to send the decryption key to the same wallet which paid the ransom. The victim can then just paste it into the decryptor and get their files. This is really quite a clever way of doing things, as it removes any need for Deadbolt to operate their own infrastructure, like a dark website or something, to send the key to the victim. Instead, they can just have a script to monitor the payment address and automatically plop the key onto the blockchain when a payment is made. It's quite a slick setup, however, unfortunately for Deadbolt, there's a really basic but severe problem with it. You see, Deadbolt's script didn't take into account how many confirmations a ransom payment had before sending out the corresponding decryption key. And if you know a bit about Bitcoin, you can probably see where this is going. So Bitcoin transactions aren't instant. The second you send a Bitcoin payment, it enters the Bitcoin transaction pool before it eventually gets included in a block, which is then written to the chain. Only once a transaction is in a block on the chain, in other words on the blockchain, is it generally considered complete, and this usually takes 10 minutes or so. The number of confirmations refers to how many blocks deep a transaction is on the blockchain. The more confirmations means the less reversible a transaction is. A crypto exchange like Coinbase will wait till there's 3 confirmations before it'll consider the transaction finalized. Exactly how many confirmations are needed before a transaction is considered 100% irreversible is up for debate, but Deadbolt didn't wait for any before sending out decryption keys. This is really dumb on their part, because whilst a transaction is in the pool, it's really easy for someone to cancel it. And this is pretty much what the Dutch police did. They paid the ransoms for 155 victims and instantly received the decryption keys. At this point, Deadbolt was probably over the moon at their payday, which would have been equal to roughly $90,000. But before they could celebrate, and more importantly, before the transactions could be written to the blockchain, Dutch police cancelled the ransom payments, so they effectively got the decryption keys for free. The operation to nab the keys was done in collaboration with responders.nu, who initially discovered this vulnerability, and they've set up a website where victims can get their decryption keys. However, this was always going to be a one-off operation, because after realizing their mistake, Deadbolt fixed the vulnerability and now require transactions to have 2 confirmations. This video is sponsored by PCBWay, the complete solution for all your PCB fabrication and on-demand 3D printing needs. From standard PCBs to the more advanced varieties, PCBWay provides granular control over every element of your PCB. With super fast turnaround times, you'll be spending more time creating and less time waiting on packages. PCBWay also offers on-demand machining. From CNCing and sheet metal cutting to 3D printing and injection molding, there's an array of materials to choose from, and of course, super fast turnaround times. Sign up now using the link in the description to get a $5 coupon which can be used site-wide. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.